Hi there, this is Chad Watts from Watts Mortgages, powered by TMG. I'm doing a podcast, the very first podcast, with Laurence Owen of, tell me where you're from, Owen. Laurence Owen.
Team 3000 is the actual company, but my little sub company is Vancouver Coastal Real Estate, basically serving all Lower Mainland and Sunshine Coast, even over to Vancouver Island. If I need to go there with a client, I will. So I'm mobile.
Yes, you are. Man of many hats and many locations.
And 25 years this year.
Wow. Well, I
Yeah,
guess, actually, you know what? I think I'm around 15 or 16, so a little older
it
and a little longer in the tooth than I anticipated.
happens to us all.
Okay, so we're
Anyway,
going to chat about, I guess we'll call it, we were just chatting about earlier. We'll talk about the new sort of version of a stress test that's going to be on the horizon in 2025 and go over what we think might be some of the implications. Of course, nobody really knows, but we're going to kind of hash that out.
yeah, and then as we had previously spoken about, this is more your area than mine, but it's going to be an interesting to learn a little bit more.
Yeah, well, we're definitely going to be conjoined at the hip in the next year on this particular topic because yeah, it's going to affect us, but what it's going to do ultimately is hard to tell. So, as some of you have probably started to see in the news, because it's been around for a few weeks, OSFI, like our office of superintendent that governs all federally regulated mortgagers, is coming out with a new rule, and that new rule is stating that 75% of their book per quarter has to be dedicated or has to be allotted in a way that you can only do 4.5 times somebody's income as a like maximum loan amount. We didn't have that before. We had other limiters in, but nothing as a hard cap like that. 25% of that book will be allowed to go outside of that, and that is going to be the secret sauce of where that ends up and how it affects the market. So, Laurence, what's your first initial thoughts on when you hear that? What's your gut reaction?
The reaction will be that obviously they're trying to create a stress test for to slow the market is basically what it is. Not wanting people to overextend, and in some cases, I agree with it. Protecting the consumer by making it harder because we all know that people will sometimes do things that can get them into trouble later on. Our job is to stop people from doing that, but you can't always protect your clients if they want to do something. We try to do the best we can by saying, "Hey, look, you've got a budget. You don't need to spend over that budget. Um, let's see what we can do for you." But in some cases, then somebody like yourself needs to get in there with a little protection for those guys. The feds are actually helping out with that, and I don't really disagree with it. But there's also other things in behind there, um, basically propping up the lenders, from what I can see. What do you think about that?
Well, I think the general sentiment of what you just had is something similar to what I've had. Much like I still had more of a positive view of the stress test, not in its totality, but in general, in the sense of like if we have a changing rate market, can we make sure people are protected against it? And as it turns out, it was wise because we went way beyond that stress test at one point in time. So, at least we had some people a little more protected than they would have been otherwise. And if we didn't have that stress test, I think during the giant run up during COVID, I mean, if you think prices are high now, can you only imagine how high they could have been? Because when people are overbidding 200,000, it's a bit of a wild thing.
We
So
saw more than just 200,000.
yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
I don't mind bumpers out there to keep people protected. And so yeah, I think the gist of it, I don't have a fundamental problem with. And I also go, okay, right now, because rates are so high, in effect, 4.5 times your income is really what people are qualifying for right now. So if right now was continued, I'm not necessarily like totally worried about it, but Things I would be worried about is I kind of worry that it's going to, at least initially, like in the initial stage. So let's just say like the first 6 months of it being implemented, I worry that there's going to be a bit of like a flood towards the bottom end of the market. And here we are talking about affordability and first-time home buyers and people getting into the market. And we already know in the greater Vancouver region, and elsewhere in Canada too, but we're going to deal with what we are. First-time home buyers having a heck of a time getting in. And if we compress all people into that bottom sector, it just feels like they're going to be potentially like locking people out. Maybe not for good, maybe for good, but it does feel like it sets a potential floor for the first 6 months. Because I do see, because people aren't going to lower their prices right away. We've already seen that, with high rates and like with the amount of like how much the market has withstood having, a decline in prices. People expecting the roof to cave in, and it certainly hasn't. So there's resilience that's been there. So I go and look at it and go, well, that resilience might exist with this 4.5 there, but maybe those really high priced homes start to come down, but the bottom isn't going to, at least initially, because there are people who just have to buy. Not everybody can just sit on the sidelines. There's people moving in, need to get a home. There's divorces, like all sorts of buying decisions that are not just speculative. And I think initially it could kind of peg that bottom area and bring it up a little bit, making it tougher for people just to get in the market to start with. So that's my, I think, short-term concern.
Agreeable, but as per usual, I always see that when you see regulations come out, and regardless of what it is, and remember, these are not fixed in stone. If they can say something that they're bringing in, 3 years from now, they can always remove something. So it's not necessarily everything is set in stone. But I always see it this way: it's easy to bring out regulations after the barn door's been left open for for the
Say that.
last 10 years,
Yeah.
or 5 years, or whatever it is. And again, they absolutely dropped the ball. We can go back 2008, or prior to that, because I think, I don't know if you remember, 0% down.
On a
And
rental property.
yeah, and at the time, I was saying to my clients, don't do that. Put 10% down or more, because what's going to end up happening, if it turns, you're going to be in a shortfall. So build equity right off the bat. Don't basically don't rely on a market always going up.
Yeah,
And of
have a
course,
bit of a
markets
buffer
fluctuate.
in case of turbulent times.
Obviously, and that's a perfect way to look at it. And of course we didn't, and we saw the effect of that as we had that little turn. But what ends up happening? It goes back up. A flood of money coming in. Well, a lot of people were saying to the government, "Hey, we got a problem." What did they do? Nothing, because they want the tax money.
They want the
They
tax
they
money,
want
but
the
they're also
property.
enjoying, like the exuberance in the market that, I think
Exactly.
creates a bit of a sugar high, so people feel like they're richer than they are.
Yeah, and not just the people, but the government itself. So,
Yeah.
hey, we're looking good. So what do? Well, we ride the wave until it's a problem, and then, oh, hey, we got to do something. So the problem is now, and big question is, um, for 2024, we've got 2.2 million renewals coming up for on mortgages. Good for you.
Hope
Um,
so. Well, let's hope so that I can help them and keep it lower.
Yeah, but renewals, can they swap? Can they go from one company to another company now? Is that something that's going to affect you?
Well, that's the part and this is where there's going to be that gray spot. They haven't articulated the plan entirely, at least not that I'm aware of in the readings I've come across. And so what we're wondering is people, a little less to do with like the multiple property or the single property owner. I mean, that still could be a problem because yeah, if you're outside of that 4.5 multiplier because you got in and it was 7, are you going to be able to do a renewal somewhere else? Possibly not. Yeah, like you might be stuck with whatever rate you get, and too bad, so sad. Um, well, what time will tell on that front, but it does bring up like a possible anti-competitive like part of the market.
And of course, we're supposed to be in a competitive market. So I don't understand well, in some ways, I don't understand why they would want to limit that. But the question is, at $250 billion in 2024 will be renewed or should be renewed. For 2025, there's 3.4 million mortgages coming due. And of course, COVID is the reason for this. That's $350 billion. Not only are they trying to they're trying to buffer the lenders. They're trying to build up that their pocketbook so they can cover the 350 billion. So therefore, do they want the competition in low rates? I think it's a
Yeah, so
case
you're
of,
saying that maybe by having a lack of competition, they're going to offer whatever rate they want, knowing they can, and then building up their pocketbook because they're making a larger spread than they would have otherwise.
well, and otherwise, can they cover 350 billion for next year?
Yeah.
Can they do that after having a 250 billion this year? I mean, there's a stress test right there.
Well, it'd be
So,
interesting too, actually. So yeah, actually just made me think of something by bringing that up. Like, we rely on people to be moving up and moving down and selling homes as part of it because it's not all just new supply, clearly. Okay, so what if I'm in a home that I qualified for, in COVID times, and I want to move up and it was 7.5 times my income because it just worked under those rules. And now that we have this new rule, I go to sell my place and I have to requalify potentially with the new lender. Boop. Nope. You're not qualifying for anything. Potentially you're capped to where you are, which means less stuff coming to the market because people are kind of trapped into their homes, which is going to be meaning there's more competition for less stuff.
right. And also now add in the flipping tax.
Hmm.
So limiting people from basically, well, not limiting, what they're saying is, yeah, go ahead, sell your house, but if you make a profit, we're going to tax you on the profit. Um, but the barn door thing being open again, well,
Yeah.
yeah, we're not seeing like I have a client that's bought a place last year for 1.3, we'll call it 1.3. And it's a townhouse, and they've suddenly decided, you know what? We would like to go somewhere else and move out of town. We kind of made a mistake, so we're going to sell. What about the flipping tax? Well, they're not going to make any money on that place. They've only been in it for X amount of time. So essentially, if they broke even, they'd be lucky. So it's not going to really affect them on profit. My suggestion to them is don't worry about the flipping tax. You're not really going to be hit by it. But make sure you
Do
check
you
everything.
happen to know, in the case of the flipping tax, and we could look into this later and add it into the notes below, um, when it comes into effect, if you were already, because my guess would be is that you've already in a home less than a year, prior to it being implemented, you would think you'd be fine. It would be
No,
anything going on after.
no, they're basically going to go back and retro it, I
Oh,
believe.
really?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'll
So
definitely double check just because I'm not sure, and it's just good for
I
my own edification. And for whoever ends up watching this, they'll also
yeah.
learn too. But yeah, that like if that's the case, ouch.
Yeah, I mean, basically, it comes in at a certain date, but they actually did put a little caveat to say that if you bought the house within 2 years prior, that would also be looked at. So I may be wrong, but I'll have to double check on that.
Absolutely.
This just came about with my clients. So
Yeah, no, and this is like because we've had a slew of new regulations coming across provincially and federally. And yeah, it's kind of hard to keep up with all that because, of course, when they do come out with these new rules, we get the sort of high level view of it, but we don't get the details. And we all know the devil's in the details.
well, and we also know that the the line is seek a separate legal representation, or by all means talk to a professional mortgage person like yourself. Just
Mhm.
push off
Yeah.
for the first little bit till we get caught up.
Yeah. So go looping back a little bit. So it seems like, well, at least some of our thoughts on it is that there's going to be a little bit of a law of unintended consequences with the 4.5 multiplier of income, being that maybe it stifles sales potentially. Obviously, less competition, which is like in terms of rates, which isn't good for the buyer,
And what do you
or
think's
sorry, for
happening?
the homeowner, I should say.
Yeah, and I think I saw a post from somebody that I follow, and they were saying that right now with the inventory being quite low, I believe prices have climbed in the certain market that he was talking about 7.4% over last year.
Mhm.
So not everything is down. Not everything is going doom and gloom.
Oh.
Um,
I
I've
mean, we're
got
seeing right priced stuff moving, which I
Yeah,
mean,
absolutely.
it's
I've got a West Vancouver very small place, like under 500 square feet, but I've got a place in West Vancouver coming on level entry. It's going to be about $560,000 in West Vancouver. Now, tennis court, swimming pool. If that sticks around more than a weekend, I'd be very surprised. Um, and then you go up onto one of the coastal areas I'm talking about. I won't give any I won't give any hints because I'm sure there'll be about 30 or 40 realtors going, I know that property. But a place I sold 17 years ago is coming back to the market, and I sold that for like 600,000. That's coming back for 2 million. So yeah, good for the guy, right?
absolutely good for the
Yeah.
guy.
And my number one client, I sold him 10 places.
Oh, wow.
So there are people out there, and that I don't think that place will last long. It's there are people out there still with the ability to buy property.
Yep.
So
Yeah, there's
and sell
for
property.
sure. Yeah, for absolutely for sure. And like, we're seeing activity go up. I mean, I'm not seeing like rocket levels of activity, but it's spring market. Things are, clicking over. There's been a lot of people on the sidelines, and there still are people on the sidelines. But the point being is there is market activity and there is a bit of a floor at the moment. I think realistically, this is a little bit off our topic, but realistic, if we're going to see any real declines in property values, I mean, the rates have been this way for a while, so we kind of know that we are where we are. It could grind sideways potentially, but unless we see job losses, I can't myself see some sort of like appreciable drop off.
Right.
Now
And we
it could
also
happen.
and I you can fill me in here, but I don't see a rate increase coming. I see only coming down now. So
Yeah. Oh, I think it's just
level
I think
level
it's
for
just
a
the
while.
question of when, right? That is
Yeah.
the I go into my Twitter or X feed, and it's a lively, spicy place.
Yeah.
But that is, I mean, even the most pessimistic people are just more about it's just happening later. It's just happening later. It's happening later. So higher for longer. But like very few people, except for the most bearish of bear people, which I don't even believe, are like, oh, it's going up to 7%.
It's much easier to say to somebody coming into the market, look, I mean, you're looking at least a balanced interest rate right now where it's going to be at this rate for X amount of time. We don't know how long, but we don't see it rising. But at least you can set your budget on a level interest rate, we believe, for some time. It's much easier to do that than say, hey, we don't know where it's going to rise to in the next 3 years, which we were doing, last couple of years. So budgeting, right?
Yeah, well, that is the key, budget, 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 budget. And I think when I'm talking to clients, they are all now looking much more tightly at budget. That previously it was solely how much could I qualify for? And it's still like an absolutely big part of it just because of the cost here. But it was at one point in time just how much didn't care what the monthly payment was. And now like people are definitely starting to trend towards, ooh, yeah, what's my monthly payment? What does that mean to me? Can I afford it? How
And
stable
then
do I
more
feel in my
gas.
job? Which I mean, I'm glad that part's coming back because that part should have never been lost.
Well, and that's a stress test. I mean that is part of the of protecting the client as well. During COVID was crazy where people were just coming in saying, "We'll just throw money at it." I mean, I wrote deals that were, uh, you know, I thought were not the right value for the property, and told my clients, "This is, I'm thinking that this is going to be too high for the property." And they're like, yeah, we're willing to go this much. And it's like, Okay, we'll do that. So we put it down, and one place sold for $375,000 more than our offer, which was it was like five.
Was that like middle of the frenzy, early part of the frenzy? Just curious
It
on the
was
arc.
it was the middle of the frenzy, and I kind of went, this is nuts. This is just becoming
Oh, I think at that
silly.
point in time I felt, I wouldn't say beaten down because I'm not the one paying the price, but a little
I
bit
was
beaten
beaten
down in
up.
the sense of like I like to understand the market and I like to feel like I have a pulse.
Yeah,
And you were hearing like 300 and like of course you're questioning like were they listing low? I mean, you because all of the tactics and like trying to get bidding wars going. But it was frustrating from I just look at, affordability long term. I'm like, this is just nuts.
yeah, but and that's where I'm going. Where are the feds at that time,
Oh God, yeah. That's where like,
right?
well, we know where they were. I think Macklem even said, well, we'll take whatever we can get to juice the economy. I mean, I'm paraphrasing poorly, but that is the sentiment of what he said. And
Exactly.
well, we're all paying the price for that.
Yeah, we'll write it out, and we'll get those property transfer taxes, and we'll get the all the other taxes that he can collect. To what end? Now they go and try to close that barn door. It's gone. It's the
Oh
same
yeah.
with it's all the same with all the money that came from foreign um,
Sources. Yep.
entities,
Yep.
where basically for years saying we got a problem, we really need to look at this, and I was told no, we don't.
No. And it got couched in different reasons as to why it's not happening or why you're
Yeah,
coming to your point that may not be valid. I'm going to leave that side of it out because it's a bit spicy, but
chicken, spicy chicken.
yes.
Um, Yeah, no, it's but yeah, so yeah, my overall look is that with the amount of mortgages coming, we're looking at almost 600 or 700 billion dollars in the next 2 to 3 years. That is huge amount of money for a
Yeah.
small little
Well,
country.
and that's I'm gonna think I'll leave the topic on this part, but part that like it kills me is that yeah, we're gonna even if rates do come down, they're still gonna be coming off rates that were like three and below. So they're gonna be coming into like their rates, we'll just say mid fours, maybe low fours if we're lucky, right? It's totally possible. Um, but on very large mortgages.
Yes.
As I mentioned to you, like I'm trying to help a client right now, and his mortgage renewal is, effective when it's going from 7,200 to 11,000, and we're going to hopefully get it down a little bit lower as we work away at it. But I mean, that may be a little bit of an exception to most people, but it is emblematic of some of the pain of what people are going to face.
So some of the question is, at what point do the banks say, "Hey, I can't do that. The value's not there. I'm not loaning to that," especially, depending on what
I
was
gotta be
put
honest
down.
with you, I don't. I mean,
I mean, a
I've
lot
been
of
wrong
people put a lot
before.
of money
I don't.
down.
I just see them just like. I would suggest that they don't want to. They would just continue to keep them in there as long as it's being paid. In part because I think if like they forced a sale, of course, or not renewed the mortgage, which would be forcing the sale, that could erode the rest of their book. Because if enough banks did it, you'd be
Oh
having
yeah.
enough forced sales that maybe that softens the market overall. And I would argue that maybe that wouldn't be done because they would view it not in their best interest collectively.
Oh, I agree. I agree. I've saved clients by calling the lender and saying, "Look, why would you do this? Why would you foreclose on this? Because you're better off to shore him up for the next 6 months." Circumstances in there. But and the lender's gone, yeah, you're right. I'll keep it going. Um, so, but yeah, I agree with you. Like shoring up is much better, or at least helping out. But at what point can they do that at 700
Well, I
billion
mean, will we hit a
dollars?
breaking point? I will TBD. I go back to the, jobs. It's going to be jobs. I think that's going to be if you want the canary in the coal mine, if that happens, and it may not happen, we've been resilient, but if
I
that
might be
happens,
looking
it's
for a
going to be
job.
jobs. Get that side hustle going, buddy.
Ah, the professional golf thing's just not going to happen for me at my age.
Well, dare to dream. Dare to dream. All right, I think
Yeah.
we're getting a little off, we're not off topic, but we'll wrap up because I think we kind of covered it with a fair level of depth. Thanks for
Well,
doing the first one with me. That was not so bad.
Well, I'm going to tell you a secret. That's the first one for me.
All right.
I
Well,
tend to
next
share.
time we do this, I guess we're no longer virgins.
I no, yeah, that boat sailed many years ago. Um, no, and it's interesting. I tend to shy away from public speaking. Not me. So, but it's been fun. Actually,
Well, in this case, we're just having
it's
a
a
chat, really.
one-on-one. It's a
Yeah.
one-on-one. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little different without having like people in front of us and you're sitting in your living room.
Well, nobody can critique right now. We'll leave it
Yeah.
do
Well,
that.
since this will be the first one out, we won't very much viewership, but in time we might be seeing some critiques.
You never know. Okay. Well, it was a pleasure.
My pleasure. All right, now we can just chit chat and because it can clip out this part.
Stop recording.
Stop recording, chat. Stop it.